Tonight, out of quarantine, but what now? The first of the returned travellers leave their hotels, but many can't get home. Also tonight, the Northern Territory goes almost a week without new coronavirus cases, but residents are warned about flouting the rules. A helping hand, Darwin community groups get together to feed struggling international students. And keeping fit until the Games, how Australia's Olympic athletes are staying in shape in isolation. Good evening, Amy Culpitt with ABC News. The Northern Territory has now gone 6 days without a new case of coronavirus being detected. But the Health Minister says there's no room for complacency, with some people still flouting mandatory isolation directives. It comes as the first group of international arrivals forced to quarantine in a Darwin hotel 2 weeks ago were given the all clear to leave.
Late last month, these passengers flew from Dili to Darwin, where they were immediately taken to an airport hotel to undergo 2 weeks of forced quarantine.
My heart dropped like a stone at first.
But a fortnight later, Michael Cuttajar is now free to leave and even has a letter from the government to prove it.
It just says that thank you for doing the 14-day quarantine that was required.
East Timorese man João Alves has also just completed his 2-week stint in the same Darwin hotel and says he's simply grateful to be safe and healthy.
Thank God I'm here. It's more safe because in Timor, unfortunately, it's not really protected.
But Mr Alves has been told it could take 2 weeks before he can return home to Melbourne because of multiple flight cancellations, which have left Darwin Airport looking like a ghost town, apart from this man who didn't receive a message to say his flight to Brisbane had been cancelled.
Now I've got to find other ways to get back.
So rather than flying, he's driving the 3,000-kilometre journey back home to Bundaberg.
I'm planning now to get a hire car 2 o'clock and I'll just start heading off towards the Queensland border.
He's already secured his Queensland border entry pass, and as long as he abides by strict regulations in the Territory, he'll be allowed to travel home. But police say some Territorians are failing to comply with quarantine requirements, with 9 people fined $1,100 each over the past 2 days, including one woman who absconded from her hotel.
We don't have a police officer or a security officer on every door in every place in self-isolation. There's a high degree of expectation that people who are subject of self-isolation play by the rules.
Despite the infringements, the Northern Territory hasn't had a confirmed case of COVID-19 since Monday, but officials say there's no room for complacency.
We must be focused on what the task is, and that is flattening the curve, stopping the spread of coronavirus in the Northern Territory.
A goal that will remain in place well beyond the Easter long weekend. Jono Gibson, ABC News.
Returned overseas travellers elsewhere across the country also walked free from quarantine today, ecstatic just to be outside. But with few domestic flights available, some can't get home, while others face another 2 weeks of isolation. Jessie Dorset reports.
Oh, she is! The first glimpse of their daughter, her first taste of fresh air and freedom in weeks. Belle Lilly had little choice as coronavirus gripped the UK.
I didn't think I would get upset.
She packed up her life, leaving her car, farewelling her colleagues and boyfriend.
Flights kept getting cancelled over and over again, so it was really difficult to get back.
This is what was waiting. The confines of 4 walls could feel like an eternity.
This has been my home for the past 2 weeks.
Health staff paid a visit to every guest before checkout.
We're going to take your temperature if that's okay.
After 2 weeks in forced quarantine, some could hardly wait to step free. They left before dawn. More than 1,100 people were released in Sydney alone.
Fresh air and sunshine. We're just overwhelmed.
Let me just say, it was a gorgeous view, but I never want to see Darling Harbour again, ever.
Many who live interstate were dropped here at Sydney Airport, but with Virgin Australia not flying on Saturdays and other airlines reducing their schedules, some had nowhere to go. A few chose to hire a car, while others called in a favour.
My flight was cancelled, so my husband drove all the way from Brisbane to pick me up.
But driving's not an option for everyone.
3 days. Yeah, so it hasn't been really a good fun trip, but we're making the most of it.
So too, Tessette Lagarde and her son Typhoon. When they finally reach home in central Queensland, there'll be even more time for trumpet practice.
So I've got my instructions here, which change daily, of course. But yes, 14 days of quarantine, I believe. Isolation at home.
For these travellers, there's no sweeter place to be.
Finally made it home.
Jessie Dorset, ABC News, Sydney.
500,000 Americans are now infected with coronavirus. That's nearly 3 times more than Spain, which has the second most recorded cases in the world. And it's seen the surge to 500,000 in just 6 weeks. But there are some glimmers of hope, with New York hospital admissions slowly dropping. North America correspondent Catherine Diss reports.
Okay, here we go.
Dr. Anand Swaminathan is on the front lines in the fight against COVID-19. At his New Jersey hospital, dozens of people have lost their lives.
I've never seen anything like this. I've never seen so many patients with critical illness at the same time. I've never seen so many patients intubated and on ventilators.
He spoke to the ABC from the safety of this small room at his emergency department.
Probably about 10 by 8 feet or so.
One of the few places doctors and nurses can take off their protective gear.
We do have patients who die, and we're used to that. We're not used to seeing this volume of patients dying in such a short period of time.
In New York, another 777 people died yesterday. Morgues are at capacity, funeral homes overrun.
You cannot be focused with 30 funerals going on at the same time.
But some good news, the number of hospital admissions and those in need of intensive care is dropping.
There are fewer people in the intensive care unit statewide than there were. And again, that's the first time we've seen a negative number, so that's good.
But Australian doctor Mel Herbert warns against complacency. He retired from his Los Angeles emergency department 4 years ago. He's one of tens of thousands signed up to go back.
It's all hands on deck. This is a once in a lifetime, we hope, pandemic. Hope to never see anything as bad as this again. This is as bad as it was in the pandemic 100 years ago.
As stay-at-home orders continue to cripple the economy, the US president is getting impatient, setting a new target to get things going again by May.
Can you say, sir, what metrics you will use to make that decision?
The metrics right here. That's my metrics. That's all I can do.
That sparked fear among health officials, who warned lifting restrictions would wind back the progress made. The president says he will listen to his top advisors, but ultimately the decision rests with him. Catherine Diss, ABC News, Washington.
A Victorian nurse on the front line of the coronavirus crisis in the United States has urged Australians to do everything they can to avoid the disaster that is unfolding in that country. Yanti Turang is helping run a new 1,000-bed hospital set up in under a week to cope with the outbreak in New Orleans, one of the worst affected areas. Richard Willingham reports.
More than 750 people have died in Louisiana since coronavirus struck. New Orleans is so overrun that the National Guard has set up this makeshift hospital at a convention centre for less acute COVID patients. Australian nurse Yanti Turang is helping run it.
I think every single Australian needs to realise that this disease, it doesn't see borders, it doesn't see race, it doesn't see gender, it doesn't see class. And it could happen to anyone. And I've been taking care of patients who are in their late 20s and they've died. Patients, older patients, patients my parents' age that haven't made it, patients that are my age that haven't made it.
She grew up in country Victoria in Kyneton and worked in Sierra Leone during an Ebola outbreak before moving to New Orleans, where she's on the front line at the trauma hospital.
Usually when you're intubating a patient or you're having to take over their respiratory ability, Most of the time it's, from a trauma or an accident that has caused them to usually be unconscious, and we have to take over the breathing. But what's been scary with COVID is that the patients are talking to you. I have said to a patient, did you want to FaceTime your family or give somebody a call? Which also is a strange kind of interaction to have before you intubate someone and you're not really sure if they're going to make it.
And while Australian case numbers are stabilising, Ms Turang has a message she hopes everyone hears.
Australia, you don't want to be here like where we are in the United States. It's terrifying. Other states are preparing if they can, but the numbers will keep climbing and we're going to lose a lot of people here.
Richard Willingham, ABC News.
More than 100 Australians and New Zealanders are heading home after being stuck for more than 2 weeks on a cruise ship near Uruguay. The 96 Australians and 16 New Zealanders have been transported to Montevideo, ready to get on a charter flight to Melbourne. It's expected to arrive tomorrow morning.
Anchors away. We're now on our way to the dock at Montevideo to go home. Woohoo!
Most of the passengers on board the Greg Mortimer, which visits Antarctica, have tested positive to coronavirus. About 100 people remain on board the ship, awaiting negotiations with their home nations. Like Australia, much of Europe is also restricting Easter holiday travel, but church leaders have found novel ways to hold religious observances. Europe correspondent Linton Besser reports from London.
The northern spring in sun-starved England always draws people outside. This year, they're being urged to stay home. Exercise is a legitimate exception, but at times, social distancing rules are bent or broken, drawing a rebuke from police. It was the same story across Europe. In Spain, roadblocks to check that only essential journeys were made. A German pastor found a novel way to continue Easter worship. A drive-in church with car radios tuned in to hear the sermon. Elsewhere, Good Friday rituals took on added solemnity. The Way of the Cross procession is normally held in a crowded Colosseum. This year, Pope Francis used an empty St. Peter's Square to symbolically retrace the story of the crucifixion. Fire-damaged Notre Dame Cathedral in Paris was already at reduced capacity. During the lockdown, services became even smaller, with a soloist rather than an orchestra and celebrants in hard hats and protective suits. While life has been upended for most of the country, in Calais, asylum seekers have little protection from coronavirus. There's no social distancing in the food queue. Conditions are hard enough, even without a pandemic.
We are sick people. Too much difficult in here. There is no tent, there is no good food.
It wouldn't be much better for them if they could get across the Channel to England. About 1,000 people here died from COVID-19 on Friday. Britain's current toll is higher than the worst days in Italy and Spain. Linton Besser, ABC News, London.
Things were looking very different elsewhere around the world as well. The holiest site in Christianity, the Church of the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem, is closed for the first Easter since 1349. In Ecuador, a Catholic bishop took to a helicopter to navigate restrictions, giving his Holy Week blessings from the sky. And during a lockdown in Mexico, this man walked for more than 4 hours carrying a cross, which thousands of people would normally line the streets to watch. Community groups in Darwin have been running food drives offering meals to local international students who are struggling financially. Many of the students have limited options for work during the coronavirus pandemic and are having trouble saving money for essential items.
A heartwarming gesture for Easter.
Thank you so much.
Rather than celebrating at home, these Territorians are handing out food for those in need.
We like to remind you that you are not alone. We like to remind you that we are in this together.
Among those lining up are international students stuck in limbo, unable to access government benefits and struggling to get back home.
I was working in Darwin Convention Center. Darwin Convention Center obviously shut down, no events, no more people.
I don't have much savings and I have to pay my lease, which is $150 every week, and I have to pay for food, so it's quite hard to go back home as well because the flights are very expensive.
Around 1,000 international students have applied for financial support with Charles Darwin University. The food offered to them by local charities, businesses and community groups is very much welcomed.
I feel very, very nervous. Actually, it's hard for me to sleep at night.
Never forget all the efforts that we put to bring thousands of international students, hundreds of thousands of international students who come to Australia to study, to live their dreams, to pay taxes just like anyone else.
But that Australian dream has come to a sudden halt, with thousands of people in the Territory now searching for work. The founder of this food drive says he's noticed a growing number of faces seeking help.
We started off from Palmerston, Centrelink, where we supplying sandwiches and water every morning, Monday to Friday.
Now serving at the CDU campus, there are many more grateful for the certainty of a warm meal. Suwaiba Hanifi, ABC News.
Frontline hospital staff will be the first to trial an existing vaccine to see if it helps prevent the severity of COVID-19 symptoms. Researchers are calling the 6-month study a world first, and if successful, it could be rolled out to the general public.
There's a lot of hope in this vial. It could mean an end to self-isolation and a real shot at saving lives. The BCG vaccine was originally designed to protect against tuberculosis, but it's also a common treatment for bladder cancer patients.
What the BCG vaccine will be doing will be stimulating the immune system, making it stronger, and therefore the person may still acquire an infection from COVID-19, but they'll be able to fight it much better and actually have a very mild disease.
The South Australian Government has provided $200,000 for the trial, saying it's vital to support frontline workers who are at increased risk of contracting this disease.
If they do contract COVID-19, whether in the work context or elsewhere, we want to give them an opportunity to reduce the symptoms.
The SA Health and Medical Research Institute will conduct a 6-month clinical trial with 500 doctors and nurses. Half of the participants will receive the vaccine and the other half will receive a placebo.
Researchers at SAMRI have been studying the off-target effects of this vaccine for quite some time and believe it could make a real difference in the fight against COVID-19. So does the World Health Organisation, which has provided its backing for the trial.
It's part of a larger study with the Murdoch Children's Institute in Melbourne that's likely to involve thousands of other hospital workers.
It's a trial that's leading the world, and the results of this will have an impact right across Australia and right across the world.
If the results are positive, researchers hope to expand it to even more frontline workers as soon as possible. Helen Frost, ABC News, Adelaide.
More than a dozen federal police recruits could be kicked out of the force as more details emerge of a late-night party held at their residential college. The ABC's learned alcohol is now banned, but students claim their superiors told them they could interact closely because they were living and training together. Here's Defence correspondent Andrew Green.
Inside their close-knit residential college, recruits learning how to enforce the law were about to find themselves on the wrong side of it.
The time is 11:20.
This late-night Canberra party, in apparent breach of strict new coronavirus regulations, prompted a visit from ACT Police and a public rebuke from the first law officer of the land.
It sounds like that should definitely be a matter of disciplinary proceedings for the Commissioner with his recruits.
Now the ABC can reveal more details of last week's events. College insiders say those involved were on protective service officer courses and had just completed their firearms training. Some of the trainees are said to have reacted poorly when confronted about their behaviour. 14 are now under formal investigation, handed show cause notices as to why they shouldn't be expelled. The AFP recruits caught up in this investigation have expressed frustration at their treatment. They say their superiors regularly told them that they were living and training in a bubble and that regular social distancing rules didn't apply to their group. And they say exercises involving physical contact are continuing. Health authorities have expressed some sympathy for their situation.
A lot of these rules, when they're pragmatically implemented, are very difficult. Every single Australian, not just AFP recruits, has found that a real challenge.
So far, the AFP and its commissioner are declining to answer questions. Andrew Green, ABC News, Canberra.
Easter is usually a time for families to get together, but for many that won't be possible this long weekend. Psychologists are warning that people may feel distressed by not seeing their loved ones, but they're urging everyone to pick up the phone and stay connected.
This is how Queensland toddler Anna Lawrence will be seeing her father at Easter.
Is the Easter Bunny coming?
As a mine worker in Western Australia, the Bundaberg father will be away from his family until travel restrictions ease.
He said he'd be more worried that he'd bring it home and make them sick. So I think in a way it might be a good thing that he is stuck over there, as sad as it is.
They don't know when they'll be together again. It's the same for many families, and there are concerns feelings of separation could intensify over the long weekend.
One of the good things that it's happening at this time is that we have digital technology. So that allows us to be connected in a way that we never have been before.
The Lawrence family is embracing it.
We FaceTime a lot, like before he goes to work and when he gets home. If he knows he's going to be late, he will pre-record a video for Anna.
Experts say it's important to remember grandparents who are separated from their grandchildren during the health crisis. They too could benefit from video chat.
They also may be feeling, the anxiety and the stress of not having that day-to-day contact that they may have had beforehand.
The advice is to include them in everyday activities.
You could have people around for a meal by having the laptop on the dining table. You can play games. Somebody could even read a story to kids as they're going to bed.
Johanna Marie, ABC News, Bundaberg.
With the Olympics and Paralympics delayed and many training facilities closed, our athletes have had to get creative to keep up their preparation for the Tokyo Games. One swimmer has turned the dam on his farm into a practice pool, while others are turning their homes into training grounds.
A dairy farm is not the ideal location to train for the Tokyo Games, but strange times call for creative thinking.
It's always been a bit of a joke about swimming in the dam, and once they said all pools in Victoria closed, Mum looked at me and was like, yep, we're getting it done tomorrow, we're setting the whole thing up.
In the North Victorian town of Echuca, the Pearce family wanted to help 16-year-old son Cole keep training for his debut Paralympics. So, using wood for the blocks and milk bottles for lane ropes, they created what they call the Pearce Aquatic Centre.
Mum was the brains of all the whole setup, and we were sort of just her slaves setting it all up.
It's great preparation for Tokyo if the pools there contain fish, yabbies and leeches.
I think I had an encounter with a leech yesterday on my foot, which, look, it wasn't too bad. I just sort of yanked it off and threw it back in the water.
But it does have its challenges, particularly for a swimmer who specialises in backstroke.
So there's no roof or anything to guide me in a straight line. There's no proper flags for knowing where you are in the water.
Homes across the country have become training grounds. Backyards and garages have become gyms, with athletes showing their creativity. Adelaide-based diver Laura Hingston is in the garage, not the pool, using a skateboard instead of a Swiss ball, and has enlisted family help.
The other day, actually, I got Mum to try and support me in handstand press-ups. The first few were a little bit disastrous. Thankfully, I wasn't dropped on my head.
Family members have become an important part of preparation, whether they are hitting partners, coaches, trainers, or even weights. While other members of the household are proving more of a hindrance. With no end in sight for the current restrictions, community and creativity may be the key.
Really, just use what you've got, and like we've done the best we can.
No matter how murky the waters, the Australians are finding a way to succeed. Peter Lusted, ABC News.
With festivals cancelled and people in lockdown, musicians all over the world are finding new ways to gather and perform. Isolade is an online festival streaming every weekend into thousands of homes. Lisa Skerritt reports.
Hi everyone.
Oh, hey.
This is so great. Cheers.
Welcome to Isolade, the online music festival where artists play 20-minute sets streamed live via Instagram.
Everything is free now.
It started as a one-off, but proved so popular, it'll now run every weekend until the end of lockdown.
I'm completely blown away by how incredible it's been, by the reception. It was just so overwhelmingly beautiful and positive.
One of the almost 300 performers to have played is Melbourne musician Emily South.
It was so nerve-wracking. It felt like playing at a festival. You know, I couldn't concentrate on watching the set just before us, just like a real gig. Then afterwards I had that same buzzed feeling of stepping off stage and after a really, really fun show.
Veteran sound engineer Steve Collins is helping artists perfect their sound.
I'm the official, unofficial sound guide by proxy.
I have seen at least one set played in a bathroom. Good choice?
Really good choice. You know, people are used to hearing themselves singing in the shower and stuff. Your voice can resonate quite nicely in a small space like that.
Despite this being online, it's got many of the hallmarks of a regular festival, including the ability to chat to other festival goers in real time.
It's almost like being at a gig and being able to talk to the people in the crowd, but you're not disturbing the performer, you know?
We have an Isolade romance. Two people have met in the chat functions.
It's just like a regular music festival.
It is a regular music festival, it is.
The festival is also raising money for Support Act, a charity that assists workers in the music industry. With real-life festivals off the cards for quite some time, this will no doubt be a staple for music lovers around the country. Lisa Skerritt, ABC News.
Now to the weather, and what a weekend it's been so far weather-wise. Cloudy and cool conditions saw some of the lowest temperatures the top end has seen since last dry. It was the coolest night Darwin's seen this wet, with the low of 21, and today's top of 29 makes it just the 6th time this wet season that temperatures haven't reached 30. Around the Territory, you can see those cooler conditions in the north. Katherine and Nhulunbuy 31, hot in Tennant Creek 34, and Alice Springs reached 31 after a cool night. Huge falls in the 24 hours to 9 a.m. Point Fawcett on the Tiwi Islands had 92 millimetres, Dum-and-Miri 72. Today, Croker Island had 64 millimetres and Maclure Island recorded 35. Taking a look around the country, cool in the south, Melbourne 16, Hobart just 14, while it was a hot one in Perth, 40 degrees. An extensive cloud band can be seen over northern Australia, while a strong cold front is sweeping across the southeast of the country. And a weak ridge lies along the Queensland coast, directing humid easterly winds into the top end. Interstate tomorrow, a cool change will come through for Perth, 26, sunny days for Brisbane, Sydney and Canberra, wet further south. To our north, storms in Singapore, 34, rain in Dili and some cloud about for Denpasar. Around the Territory tomorrow, Alice Springs to range between 13 and 32 degrees, Tennant Creek 35 and Ali Kurrang with a top of 34. Further north, storms around the coast, Katherine 35, Maningrida 32 and Groote Island expected to reach 34 degrees. Remaining cooler in Darwin tonight, 33 the top tomorrow with a possible storm, with similar conditions right across the top end. Watch those winds on the water tomorrow. High tide will be at around 9 a.m, the low at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Sunrise will be at 9 minutes to 7 and set at 6:43. And looking ahead, expect some more rain in Darwin tomorrow before drier air is expected to return from early next week. And in Alice Springs, sunny skies with temperatures heating up on Thursday. And to stay up to date with the latest on the coronavirus pandemic, head to our website news.abc.net.au. And that's ABC News for this Saturday night. Enjoy the rest of your Easter weekend. Good night.